The acronyms such as ANI, AGI, and to some extent ASI has been quite mainstream, especially since last year when GPT launched and or became more popular. I personally have been invested in the AGI space for the past decade, over a decade, and the first time I ever openly talked about it was back in 2012 at the Smart Data Conference in San Jose, California, when I gave a lightning talk talking about the conjunction between brains and machines and connected that to upcoming AGI. Let's talk about some of the differences, but one of the things that I want to also majorly focus on is a direct quote from Sam Altman that I heard the other day in regards to the AGI and his thoughts about the future of AGI. So when it comes to AI, essentially there are three major buckets that have primarily been categorized. I think it started with in MIT many years ago, but essentially there are three buckets: ANI, AGI, and ASI. ANI is where we're at today, and that is the artificial narrow intelligence. For example, let's say you go to Amazon customer service on your phone and chat with a customer representative on your phone on Amazon, let's say, and most of the time it starts with a bot, what we call a bot, but in actuality it's the AI, it's the ANI that has learned how to have normal back and forth conversation regarding, let's say, your order. These are already ingrained in our daily lives. However, when it comes to AGI and ASI, we're still not there yet. And when it comes to AGI, that is where the acronym stands for Artificial General Intelligence, and that is where these machines become self-learning and quite intellectual, such that they can more or less appear and be and interact as a human. And when it comes to ASI, artificial superintelligence, that's when they are predicted to surpass the intellect of humans. That is a eagle eye view as to what these different acronyms mean. And originally, it was predicted that AGI will be mainstream in 2040. However, most recently, that prediction has gone back to 2030, which is only 5-6 years from now. And essentially, the technology is moving much, much faster than anticipated. Now, let's talk about AGI per se, and especially this direct quote that I have here from Sam Altman the other day, because I think that is something that is extremely important to pay attention to, that may be missed by many people, because in general everybody's very afraid of that. I certainly do not want to go into the politics of it and or ethics section of it, because I think that's a whole other area that it's not the purpose of this particular video. But and I'm not taking a stance there because I just don't know. That's the reason I'm not taking a stance. But the direct quote that I wrote down here from him that I think is extremely important to pay attention to is when he said, when he was asked what he sees as a successful AGI, and in his opinion, what that would mean. The first thing that he said was that, to me, it is when a system can significantly increase the rate of scientific discoveries in the world. And I believe that most real economic growth comes from scientific as well as technological progresses. And I see this coming by the year 2030. The reason I want to emphasize here on this quote is the fact that he mentioned that AGI would increase the rate of scientific discoveries. And that is extremely important because I think that a lot of people really don't talk about it enough, but some of us in the scientific world have been thought about it and talked about it for a decade, because the scientific world, the way things move forward, by nature, it's extremely slow. And this paced in slowness is being seen and experienced even more as we evolve in technology, because technology, by its definition, it's much faster. And for example, by all the most recent technological advances that we've made, our lives are just a much faster pace, let's say, in comparison to 50 years ago. And so, but the scientific discoveries are not really keeping up with that pace, because there are many reasons for it, but one of the reasons is that the scientific discoveries have to go through rigorous review. The scientists have to join institutions, which is also time consuming. Some of them get into institutions, some of them don't. Once they are in an institution and they want to write papers, it has to go through all these different hurdles and issues, etc. And so as a result, even if scientists want to move faster, they are not, because of all these issues. In addition to that, as a human being, when you are conducting studies, you need to be extremely focused as a scientist to be able to make discoveries, because it takes a lot of brain power to be in that space, to conduct a study, to think about it, to make the discovery and to publish it and get rejected and then publish it again. And at the same time, as a human, you also have your human life, which is getting married, having kids, and all these drama that is happening around you. On top of that, if you're a caregiver of, let's say, other people or children in your life, then that's even a larger issue, because I shouldn't say issue, but it's a larger sort of hurdle, because then half of your attention, if not more, goes into that. And so over history-wise, when you look at very renowned scientists, you notice that a lot of them are loners, because you need to have that extra brain power that we spend on, your normal human lives. You need to focus that on the scientific world. Tesla, for example, was considered to be a loner, as an example, right? I'm not saying everybody is, I'm just saying in general. And so the way I see it, an AGI and or a machine whose job then potentially becomes more or less just focus on, let's say in this case, what he mentioned, scientific discoveries, do not have those hurdles and issues, I should say, or the human lives, normal life, that machines does not have that. And that, I think, is a huge point that a lot of us are not thinking about it, because it is, in my opinion, something that will be extremely beneficial when the AGI gets into the scientific discovery space. Because as a machine, you are not human, and your primarily job, in this case, the way Sam Altman says it, scientific discoveries, would be to do that. So on top of the fact that an AGI would have access to all of the knowledge in the space of internet, in the digital space, because an AGI would have access seamlessly to that. On top of that, their primary focus would be to, for example, solve a scientific issue or conduct a scientific study. Whereas as human, we go to the lab, we conduct the research, we are slow because we have to look up other information when we are doing literature review, for example. It takes us a long time to go through all that and extract the information that we need. And then we go home and then we have to work with, have our normal lives, for example, right? And in addition to that, being able to 100% focus on a scientific work as a human, it's practically impossible. And that is for that reason that I think that when he mentioned that, in his opinion, AGI would increase the scientific discoveries, direct quote from him, I think it's something that it's extremely important to pay attention to because it's really not talked about in general. Do I like it? Personally, if, for example, the idea is that the AGI would then replace scientists, of course not, because for me, I have sacrificed a lot of my day-to-day life to be able to have enough brain capacity to focus on my own scientific work. But if that means that I would be able to work with a machine, in this case an AGI, to help together conduct those discoveries to make the scientific work go faster and or be more thorough, then of course I am extremely happy. And the way, for example, that I personally talked about it way back when was the latter part. In this case, that it would not be considered something that would replace the scientists, but AGI would be something that it would be a collaborator with the scientists, if you will. However, I do want to mention that in today's world, everybody is becoming very concerned about AGI in general, especially now that it's more mainstream, that people are becoming familiar as to what that means when it comes to, let's say, replacing jobs, etc. I personally don't think about it because I see it as more of a collaboration with humans. But there's one thing that not many people really talk about is what Sam Altman said in terms of scientific discoveries, because up until now, we always talked about AGI replacing, let's say, an entry-level data entry job, for example, right? But now with all these advanced technologies and the fact that these guys are getting a lot of money streamed into their companies, in this case, OpenAI, obviously it's going to go much faster to work on AGI and develop AGI. So it is less about it taking over the mundane job, but also in addition to that, to some extent, penetrating the more sophisticated job, in this case, scientific. Sam Altman predicted all these happening in just 5-6 years from now, and I personally believe it because it's going extremely fast. Now, the question is whether everybody will have access to this, because we're talking huge number of machine power that may or may not be accessible to people. But if it becomes such a technology that it can become accessible to even people who do not have all that money to create their own, machine power, then of course it's a huge difference. It will make a huge difference in our world and more or less change our world. And I think as scientists, we need to be aware of it and not take it as an opportunity to make our work go a little bit faster forward, because in my opinion, science, in terms of comparing it to how technology moves, is extremely slow. For example, scientific work, for it to come and be published in a textbook, it usually takes about 10 years. and or a scientific work, let's say if I publish a paper today, then it does not become mainstream until it maybe hits not even textbook. It's just very, very hard. And so in my opinion, this would be a great opportunity for us to be able to move faster. Having said that, it is definitely something worth thinking about, that the AGI, the way these guys are thinking about it, the success of an AGI is not just, working and replacing these sort of mundane work, work that is just like, let's say, data entry, but actually scientific work, because up until today, the scientific discoveries are just only dedicated for a few who are in the scientific community. It's not mainstream yet. And I'm not saying scientific discoveries will be mainstream, because it takes a lot of work and dedication, and not everybody, frankly, is interested in scientific discovery. But if we are, then if the AGI penetrates into the scientific community and scientific discoveries world, then of course it's worth mentioning and it's worth thinking about. Back in 2012, when I openly talked about this, I was talking about a conjunction of machines and the brain, the collaboration and conjunctions of it, and then it was within a specific area that I was talking about. And obviously we have brain control interfaces like BCI that has been around for decades and decades. And of course we have a lot of other technologies that are 20, 30 years old. In this case, I think what Sam Altman means is that the AGI becomes a machine that is not necessarily connected to the human brain, but it is an entity on its own that can do its own scientific discovery. And that is what I mean by it being a collaborator with the scientists, not a replacement of them. And the talk that I gave was more that machines could benefit from the way in which the brain works and get data from the brain and interpret that in different ways, such that they become more and more intelligent. And that potentially becomes a future-looking technology in terms of ASI, or artificial super intelligence, which is predicted after 2050, I think, or something like that. But who knows when that's going to happen, because everything is just moving so much faster than we anticipated. So those are just my 2 cents. Take it and translate it to how you will. I'm not taking any stance in terms of ethics or politics of it, because those are huge topics. I'm just looking at it from a scientific point of view, at this point at least.